What's going on, animators? Welcome to episode 4 of our RIFF animation podcast. We're so excited to have joining us today. Annie Award-winning animator, Mr. David Hahn, is in the house. We're so excited that he stopped by and has agreed to share a little bit about his journey, what he's been up to all these years, what his path's been like so far. He's most recently over at Riot Games, but he's been through Sony a number of times, done a lot of great work on both SpiderVerse films, which we're excited to hear about, and just his path so far as well. So again, thanks, David, for stopping by. So glad to have you, and let's get right into it. Let's start at the beginning, man. Let's just hear briefly kind of what was your path into the animation industry? When did you know you kind of wanted to pursue this? And then what sort of schooling and kind of what has your path been up to this point? Just kind of summarize your journey for us.
Sure, yeah. Basically, I grew up like many animators, just, watching tons of cartoons and movies and stuff, and playing maybe a little too many video games. Giant nerd growing up, still am. And so when it came time for me to go to college, I wanted to pursue something that was in the arts, at least. I was heading towards CG in general, but I didn't know that I wanted to do animation. But at some point in school, we had assignments for every department of animation, so not just animation, but modeling, rigging, texturing, lighting, everything. And at some point I realized that I was just enjoying doing animation way more than any other class that I had. I was willingly staying up till 3 or 4 a.m. and then heading right to a 9 o'clock class. And I think that's when I realized that I wanted to sort of do deep dive into animation and fully focus on that. And again, I've just been watching cartoons and anime all the time growing up, so I think it was just a natural fit for me.
So then where did you end up studying? Where did you kind of pursue
that? I went to School of Visual Arts in New York City, and I loved going there. I formed some great friendships there. Unfortunately, when I was going to school there, they didn't really have too much of a focus on animation. We learned how to set keyframes technically, but that was it. There was no classes teaching us principles or basics of animation or anything like that. And so I sort of had to teach myself animation. And back in those days, there was hardly any resources. There were just websites and stuff like that. I think Keith Lango was a pretty big resource. He was one of the handful of people who was just putting out tutorials and stuff, and it was all text-based stuff. There was no YouTube videos talking about this or anything. So I had to teach myself a lot of that, and just scour the web for anything I can get my hands on. And then the funny thing is, right after I graduated from School of Visual Arts, Animation Mentor started up. And I was sort of a little bit sour about that, just because I felt like I could have, had a more direct and saturated source of knowledge in terms of animation. But it's all good. I have no regrets or anything.
Cool. So then, after you graduated, did you go right into finding work? Were you just kind of stay in the city for a while, or what was your kind of path after that?
Yeah, I decided to just start freelancing, just starting off with small jobs and stuff, and I actually freelanced in New York for maybe 6 or 7 years before I moved on to features. So I think it's a good way for people to get their feet wet. Maybe not doing that for 6 or 7 years, because that's a long time, unless you really enjoy it. But it's a good way to sort of get your feet wet, learn what it's like to work in a team, and learn what it's like to work with other people, and then eventually move on to features or games or something bigger. Yeah, so when I was freelancing, I worked for a few places, a handful of places that I just kept hopping back and forth from. So some of those places were like PsyOp, Nathan Love,
Yeah.
Frame Store, Hornet, Buck. There's a few more that I've been to that I can't think of off the top of my head.
Well, those are
But
most of the major players in New York City in the character animation space, at least, right? They tend to get
yeah,
land most of the character animation accounts. I know. So at the
yeah,
time, was it mostly commercial work that you were doing, or shorts, or what type of stuff did you get to work on while you were up there?
yeah. It's mostly like commercial work. They would bring me in for like, if there was a commercial that had like character animation focus on it. Occasionally, like there were times where we would be working on like game trailers, and that was like pretty nice, like game cinematic trailers. And then on a few cases, there's like, commercials where you're just like rotating a cell phone, and that's fine. That's just, it pays the bills.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, overall, like my time freelancing, like I really enjoyed it. I've formed a lot of great friendships there, and particularly in New York, in Manhattan, like the freelance scene is like really nice because like a lot of them are like located very close to each other. So you just have this like cluster of studios near each other. And if you've worked at like a bunch of them for a while, like everybody there, and you can just like grab lunch with people if you want to, like from this studio. Like if I'm working at PsyOp and I want to grab lunch with someone from Nathan Love, I could just like chat them, grab lunch. So yeah, it's pretty nice. And yeah, I guess after 6 or 7 years, I decided to try my hand at like features.
Was that originally the goal? Like when you were studying at SVA, was your kind of ultimate goal to get into features, or were you more towards the game side, or did you have like sort of a sense of that, or just kind of whatever work you could get?
Honestly, it was just like whatever work I could get, and I didn't even think that I was like capable of like, getting into like a feature studio. Like back then, like, places like Disney or Pixar were like, I put them on such a high pedestal. I was just like, I grew up watching their movies. Like I can't count the amount of times I've watched The Incredibles. Like that's one of my favorite animated movies. So yeah, like when it came to like thinking about whether I can actually work there or not, like I was always just like, geez, like I don't think I can actually do that. Like that's for like elite animators and stuff. But one day, one of my friends like suggested that I try applying to Sony Imageworks because they were ramping up for Angry Birds, and he just told me, like, he sort of convinced me to apply. I wasn't like really too keen on it or anything, but I just thought like it doesn't hurt to like give it a shot. So put a reel together, applied, and they actually wanted me to join them. So I was like, oh, shoot, I guess I have to move all the way across the country and to Canada because I'm from the States.
Did you grow up in the Northeast originally, or where did you come up?
Yeah, I'm from New York, so I was just
Okay.
born and raised there.
Awesome.
But yeah, so moved to Vancouver, Canada for that, and stayed at Imageworks for maybe, I think it was about 4 years. And then I left, went back to New York, came to California to work at Blizzard, and then I went back to Sony Imageworks again, and then Riot. So it's just, I've been hopping around for a bit.
So what would you say? What was that kind of, I guess, growth curve like from when you graduated at SVA? Was there a lot of, I guess, progression or growth of your own like personal skill set or your workflow or any of that during your 6 or so years freelancing that you think prepared you to kind of be feature ready? Or you were saying that even at the time you still didn't really feel like necessarily like that was even a path that was available for you. But would you, I guess, say you were kind of growing and progressing during that time?
Yeah, I think I was just like shooting myself in the foot by by thinking that I wasn't capable of like doing that kind of quality animation when I was. I just, again, always just sort of like put those studios on a pedestal. But, once I got into Imageworks for example, not to say that it didn't struggle, like working at a feature studio for the first time, but like once I got in there, I realized that, oh, I can actually do this stuff, and my work is like comparable to like other animators there. But yeah, for me, it took like 7 years to get to that point where I think my skill level was like acceptable for feature studios.
I've been a fan of yours for a long time. A big fan of yours. I've seen a lot of the work, like the personal shots and tests that you know did on Vimeo and stuff through the years, and I was always just kind of blown away by like the level of complexity, the kind of the cinematic value, the entertainment value of all, you know, even all the little like kind of 3D effects and details and stuff that you put into your shots and your work was always really exciting to watch and inspiring in a lot of ways. What could you tell us a little bit about the time frame of, because you're working professionally freelancing, but it seems like you are always kind of doing a lot of personal shots also. Is that part of kind of like pushing your growth to kind of reach that feature level, or sort of when? Can you kind of speak to that? Like, when were you kind of doing these personal projects or finding time to do that? Was that between bookings or freelance gigs or what?
Sure. Yeah. So, definitely, I'd try to like work on stuff like during like my time off. So like there was one personal animation that I made. It was like a girl fighting a dude, and yeah.
That one, yeah, that round one fight or whatever. Yeah, that's iconic. Yeah.
So that one I actually like I started that to put more stuff on my reel for Imageworks, like back in like 2015, which is like a very long time ago now that I say it out loud. And like I had this like vision for this like short piece, and I started it way back then, and I was like, I'm not going to finish this whole thing, but I'm going to do a few shots and then like put it on my reel. And then I'll eventually like get through like the entire thing whenever. So once I got into Imageworks, like I still wanted to work on that personal piece. But I wasn't working on it consistently because, work gets pretty tough. Like there's like a crunch and you just don't have time for it sometimes. So there were times like where I wasn't working on any personal stuff for like 6 months straight. But it would always be in the back of my mind. So whenever I did end up with some free time, or if I'm on break, like in between projects and stuff like that, I would try to like focus on that stuff. And the biggest thing that I learned from working on that piece in particular is like just keep at it. Like whatever you're working on, if you have like an ambitious like piece or personal animation that you're working on, don't feel like, you're just going to do like don't compromise and just like be okay with like 7 seconds of something and be like, oh, I'm done with this. I just want to show it to everyone. Like, no, if you just like keep it close to your chest, like it may take a lot of time, but just work on it like consistently for a long time. Like the payoff for that is like so much better than just wanting to like show something immediately. So it took a very long time to actually like do that thing from start to completion. Like if you actually like, even though I wasn't working on it the entire time, if you like, consider when I started it and when it finished, like it was like, I don't know, like 2 years or something like that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but like you say, worth it. I'm sure the response to it was. I remember being blown away. I watched that probably dozens of times. So like there's just so much great detail, and the storytelling is so entertaining, and just smashing his head to the wall and all the tucks of brick that are coming off. It's just like it became kind of. I don't know. It seems like you gravitate towards that type of complexity, or even that kind of violence, just to say it. But just I think there's sort of became almost like a signature style when there were some other tests around that similar time, or ongoing that just had that quality, of that kind of like level of excellence that I think part of what you're mentioning, like just making sure you spend the time however long it takes to just make it awesome, and not feeling like the need to kind of rush it out there when it's a personal project like that. It is really, really cool. What can you tell us about that? You spoke a little bit about it, but the transition from commercial work, which is short bookings sometimes and pretty fast schedules and whatnot, and very different types of budgets, to then working on what I'm sure is very large feature teams at Sony, right? Everything's pretty small at the commercial studios in New York. I spent a long time in New York as well, so I'm sure we know a lot of people from that kind of freelancing scene, a lot of the same people. But what was that like then, transitioning to a feature studio where stuff moves a lot slower, a lot more, kind of people on the team and kind of layers of supervision and these types of things? What was that transition like for you?
Yeah, it was definitely a transition. That's for sure. I think the biggest thing that I realized when I actually started working at Imageworks was like just the level of detail and polish that they put into their animation was just like I hadn't seen that before. And that's not to say that, working on commercials, like people don't polish their stuff, like they do. But like at a feature level, that's like, you're going like levels deeper in terms of like polish and detail. And like if you don't hit specific notes, or if you don't like do what directors or leads or supervisors are asking for, like it's not going through. Like you have to do that stuff. Whereas in commercials, like all of that was kind of a little bit, clients would ask for things and we'd try to do them, but if they didn't work out, they'd be like, we're out of time. We're just going to take what we have. But no, like in features, it's just like, no, you need to do this. Like this note needs to be hit, or else it's not going to get approved. So that kind of like attention to detail, that kind of, commitment to like notes from like directors or anybody working above you, like that was definitely like an eye opener for me. And then there's just the amount of people you're working with. Working in commercials back in New York, your team of animators usually like is just a handful of people. Sometimes on big projects it might go up to like 10 or 12 people, but like usually nothing beyond that. So to go from that to, Angry Birds I think had like 80 something people, that's like a pretty big jump. And it's a little intimidating because everybody around you is just like talented as hell. But it's a good thing because just being surrounded by that much raw talent, like you just get better just being surrounded by people, like without even doing anything, just absorbing their energy and like looking at their work all the time. Like you just automatically get better. I think those are the major things that I took away transitioning from commercials to features.
Yeah, and I as I understand, or at least several people I know, kind of got their feature animation start at Sony. They often take I don't know if the chance is the right word, but they often kind of give people that foot in the door in terms of bringing on people who may not have a lot of feature experience necessarily. Were there a lot of other people on that show with you who's kind of first feature it was, who were kind of navigating that landscape a little bit with you?
Yeah, I think there were like a few people that were similar to me in that, this was like the first time working on features and stuff. So, that was a nice comfort to like not be the only person who hasn't like worked on a movie. But man, everybody was just immensely talented. Like everybody just kind of, again, being surrounded by like that many talented people, you can't help but bring your A game like to the table. Yeah.
So you go from Angry Birds. What was your next show there?
Let's see. What was it? It was Angry Birds, Storks, the two bird movies in a row.
Yeah, a lot of birds.
Angry Birds, Storks, Emoji Movie, which was a low. And then right after that was SpiderVerse. So I was actually ready to leave after Emoji Movie because that was like, creatively maybe scraping bottom of the barrel a little bit. But then they asked me to work on SpiderVerse, and I was just like, okay, I can't say no to that. So,
yeah, I mean that film feels like in a lot of ways it was right up your alley, at least based on the types of shots I'd seen you do previous. That seemed to really resonate with you. So what was it like? Coming coming onto that show? Was that, especially transitioning off of one that maybe you were less excited to work on? Was did you find yourself kind of more energized or like way into something that was in that style? I know they were doing a lot of stuff on twos, and stylistically it was its own type of thing, but also just tonally, you're dealing with kind of really dynamic action and these types of things that you tend to gravitate towards, at least in your personal work. What was it like being on that show?
No, it was awesome, man. Like, I remember when we were working on, even, I think it was as far back as Storks, maybe. Like, there were, no, not Storks. During Emoji Movie, like, we were seeing, like, tests for SpiderVerse, like, early, like, pre-production stuff. And, like, everyone was, like, sending each other, like, test animations and stuff that were being done, and we were all like, oh Jesus, like I want to work on this thing, like whatever this is. And yeah, so like coming off of Emoji Movie and then jumping onto SpiderVerse was just like a huge breath of fresh air. And also it's Spider-Man, so like that's huge. Like, most people like us, like we grew up watching the Spider-Man movies. It's like the biggest like comic book character, basically, like arguably. And so to be able to work on an animated Spider-Man movie was like really, really cool. And like, I think the style was super cool and fun to get into, because a lot of the stuff that they were doing, like the ink lines and like effects and stuff like that, was stuff that I was already doing, like in my personal work. So when, like, I think I was like almost wrapping up that like personal animation we were talking about, and like I did like tons of like, hacked Maya Geo like effects and stuff like that. And for me to like be working on that and then to go into Spider-Verse and realize that they're kind of like doing the same thing, like with like cool effects, I was just like, oh man, this is right up my alley. So like the transition going from like my own stuff to like Spider-Verse was like pretty smooth, I felt like. So yeah.
So for any of you who haven't seen David's reel on Vimeo, that has a ton of his Spider-Verse stuff in it, the whole reel, the editing, the music, everything is just like so good. It's so exciting. Like it makes you have to like sit down after watching it and then consider your life choices if you're even in the right industry.
Oh God, come on.
I'm like, I need to retire. No, it's just so good, dude. But no, I was gonna say I think that there's a connection between how people being excited to work on a project, right? Obviously, you want to bring your A game all the time, but when you're like really, when the work really speaks to you, I feel like it brings out the best in people, and they really put their best work on screen. And you were recognized by the by ASIFA at the Ennies that year for character animation for Spider-Verse. So congratulations on that, of course. But what was that? Like, to obviously have put your best work on screen and then have it recognized by your peers in that way?
Wild. Like, yeah, I felt like, well, I mean, first of all, I'm super grateful to have been like considered for that and to have won that award. That was like pretty nuts. But I think the biggest thing I remember from like that night was just like being surrounded by people who I've looked up to, like animation directors, producers, just like, well-known animators, who have always been, just on my computer screen, like, or on like movie credits. Like, they're just like these names that I'm like, wow, like that's like, these guys are like super talented. They're making like awesome movies. And then, on that night, I'm standing around and having drinks, and those people are just right next to me, and I'm just like, I do not belong here. I am just like a dude, and these guys are, really well-known directors and whatnot. So that was really cool. And yeah, it was a great night. But at the same time, I try to stay grounded. Like, I don't want to let that stuff get to my head too much. So yeah, I mean, I guess just like, I'm just grateful for that. It was an awesome night.
Sweet man, really, really, really cool. And I think there was such a collective appreciation for that film, and it showed. Obviously, they got the Oscar and all those things that year. I think the entire industry is one of those moments that makes the whole industry kind of sit up and take notice, right? And people are like, "Whoa, okay, this can be done. This is you guys brought the heat with that, and that was really exciting." Other films, at least in my tenure coming up, and as someone who's interested in this, that kind of had the same effect, at least in my mind, of like game changer type films, with like Tangled, The Incredibles, like you said, like when those came out, it was just like, whoa, what is this? Watch it again and again. And Spider-Verse was definitely one of those films, and so it was super exciting. So then, you rock it, you knock it out of the park on a film like that. What then? What was your transition then like? Were you already scheduled to leave after that, or what was that? How did that come about? Were you just kind of ready at that point, or?
Yeah, I think I just needed a break. Like I was there for like 4 years, and like Spider-Verse was like as amazing of a movie as it is. Like it took a lot out of the crew, just because like we were trying out a new style. Like lots of things were being figured out, but we were also having to make progress on the movie at the same time. So it was like it was an amazing movie. It was immensely rewarding, but it was very like draining, like the production. So after that, after 4 years of being at Sony, I was just like, okay, I need to just sort of like take a break and just like breathe for a bit. So I went back to New York for about a year and went back to doing freelance because I just wanted to like take on some easy gigs here and there. And then, eventually got the itch again to like do like more like higher end animation. So I came out to California to join Blizzard, and that was a very cool experience.
Were you working on cinematics out there?
Yeah,
gameplay.
Okay. Cinematics for Overwatch 2,
Oh, awesome.
and there was a game that they were developing that got canceled, so I can't say what it is or show it, unfortunately. But yeah, there was another cinematic for that I was working on.
So what was that like? Was that was your first time, I guess, working in games, right? Cinematics, very similar, I guess, to feature films, I would guess, imagine. But going, from feature to back to, I guess, commercial, kind of work, freelance work for a bit, and then to games. At that point, you've kind of touched all the sort of different components of the industry in that sense. What was that like, and kind of what were the, I guess, differences or kind of mental shifts between those?
Well, honestly, like I think, it kind of like what you were saying, like. Because I was in cinematics, like it basically was like I was working on features or like at a feature studio. So like Blizzard has like their game department, and then they have like their cinematics department. And the cinematics department is basically like, maybe a smaller sized like studio, but like they basically like run like a feature studio. Like the quality of work that they produce, the type of notes that we get like in reviews and stuff, like it just felt like I was working at another feature place, which was nice because it was like, I was comfortable with it at that point. And the level of talent at Blizzard there, like being able to see all the play blasts for like, some of the pre-rendered cinematics that they've done in the past was pretty insane. Like anytime I go to a studio and I'm able to look at play blasts of like old stuff that they've done, I get really excited and giddy. But yeah, everyone was there. Everyone there was like super talented, and that again, wants you to bring your best to the table. And yeah.
So were you a pretty big into games and stuff already? Were you kind of a personal fan also of of Blizzard stuff prior to that?
Not particularly. Like I did play. Oh man, I'm gonna get into games. I had to stop playing Overwatch because I was like not sleeping playing it. So
okay, that answers my question. So yeah, I'd say yes.
When it first came out, it was like I was like really hooked, but it was like starting to affect my work because I just wasn't sleeping. So I had to like put it off for a bit. But yeah, generally lots of video games in my life. Yep.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right, cool. So you're at Blizzard for a bit. How long were you there?
I was at Blizzard for about a year, and during my latter half of my time at Blizzard, I was like getting emails from Sony to come back for SpiderVerse 2. I was hesitant at first because I really liked it at Blizzard. Like they really, really treat you well, and I felt like very welcome there. But eventually the call of more Spider-Verse went out, and I went back to Sony Imageworks for round two. And
That's exciting.
yeah,
So on the second film, coming back now as an experienced person, you're already knowing the Sony workflow and pipeline and whatnot. Were you in a more senior position? Were you in like a leadership role on that film, or were you just shot in?
yeah, it was an interesting, like kind of like a hybrid position, because they wanted me to lead, but I still wanted to like animate, like because that's I think that's my forte, just like animating. So I was in like a unique position of like being a sort of character lead. So for Miles Morales, his suited up version, like as Spider-Man, Miles Morales, like I was like sort of defining what his movement style should be like. Coming up with like distinct ways for him to like traverse around the city, or like what he would look like in action, and trying to make it as distinct as possible, like different from like other Spider-Man that you've seen. So I worked with everyone on the team, including the directors, to sort of define that and like just try and see what that looks like. And yeah, that was cool.
So were you brought onto the project pretty early in that? I'm assuming if you were kind of leading in that way.
Pretty early, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I joined in like March 2021, and then I just left like end of January this year, 2023.
Oh, just very recently. Okay. And so were you? I know a lot of that probably kind of overlapped the pandemic. Were you remote the whole time, or were you were back in Vancouver?
Much, yeah. No, I was working remotely from California, and I was working for the Culver City office.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Whereas most of the team was up in Vancouver working remotely.
Okay. Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. And so, what was it like? Obviously, there's different directors of the second film. Was there any? I know you can't say too much, and it's not even released yet. But what was the experience like? Yeah.
The experience, it was like the first one. It was tough, but that a lot of that is just because of the expectations of this movie, considering the first movie did so well critically. When you win like an Oscar for best animated movie, like that's the standard, like that you've set for yourself for the sequel. So like you're aiming for that as like a base, like a default. So because of that, like everyone was like trying to do their best, but sometimes that includes changes, and changes can be like painful for animators, but we understand that that's part of the process. So it was tough, but like the stuff that we've made and are still making, I think they're still wrapping it up right now. Like it's pretty mind blowing. Like not to toot our own horn or anything like that, but yeah, it's just exciting to be able to animate that kind of stuff in like a Western CG animated movie. And by that I mean like some of the, because like I'm focused on like action type of animation, I take a lot of inspiration and influence from like anime, and there is like a lot of anime influence in Across the Spider-Verse, and
Yeah.
to me, to be able to bring that to, again, a Western CG animated film, a Spider-Man film, no less, is like, that's pretty mind-blowing to me. And that's like a chance of a lifetime. So it was tough, but I'm super happy to have worked on the film.
Yeah, I know that I probably speak for most of the world and most of the industry at least. We're excited to see it. That first film made such an impact, and yeah, I know sequels are hard. You have some things that are figured out, but like you say, you've kind of you've set that bar so high that to kind of crush your own bar, obviously, it's its own type of challenge. But
It's a double-edged sword.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so then you found yourself, after that were you just kind of contracted for that film, or did you know that you were going to kind of leave again and kind of pursue games some more, or how did that next step come about?
Yeah, so I think I just sort of wanted like a change of pace again. So towards the end of my time there, I was just putting some feelers out, seeing what else is out there. And, Riot Games has always been one of the places that I've thought about. It's just always in the back of my mind, along with Blizzard. And so I started, looking into positions there. And as soon as they had like an open position, I just applied there basically. And I think, the stuff that they're working on, that I'm getting to work on now, it's like totally up my alley. Like, because they're working on a fighting game. I don't know if you follow their stuff at all, but they've got this fighting game called Project L. It's just like a temporary name for now. But it has like, lots of influence from anime, like the visual aesthetic, and it's fighting, so it's like characters beating each other up, and I'm just like, perfect. This is exactly what I like to do. So
Awesome. And so so stepping, I guess, from you were kind of like you say in sort of a lead capacity at on SpiderVerse 2. Are you now just back animating, or are you still kind of, are you getting to mostly animate, or are you still kind of in that lead sort of position where you're not doing as much, maybe have more meetings and these types of things?
So my role now is a principal animator. So it's like, I think it's like in between senior and like lead. It's like not quite lead. I'm not like managing a team or anything. It's just like a step right below that. So like I'm doing a lot of like really cool key shots and stuff like that.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm sure we're all excited to see see that when that's released and when it comes out. So let me take, I guess, half a step back. So it's great hearing about your journey, your workflow, and it's really interesting that you've kind of traversed so seamlessly between film and commercials and games, and the highest level talent is typically able to do that, and you're sought after, I'm sure, at this point from all those places. Can you speak a little bit to, clearly you gravitate towards, like you say, these type of like combat scenarios or these types of really kind of dynamic type shots, I'll say. What is your workflow as an animator as you're approaching these seemingly really complex shots? Like, how do you kind of break down these dynamic camera movements and all this type of stuff? Can you kind of talk us through like what approaching a shot like that is for you?
Sure. For like really complex stuff, if it involves like, crazy cameras and like the character traversing like long distances and stuff like that, it all starts just like, as cheesy as it sounds, it all just like starts in my head. And before I actually animate anything, like let's say I was assigned a shot with like Miles. Well, I can use this as an example, actually. Like one of the shots that I had on the first SpiderVerse with Miles like swinging across the city, that was like, he's going a crazy amount of distance. There's lots of like crazy choreography happening, and like the camera's going wild. And, for something like that, like I have to just sit down, not actually do any work like in Maya or on paper. Like I have to just like visualize it in my head. So I'm essentially just daydreaming. Like I'll just kind of like sit back in my chair and I'll just be like zoning out and like trying to like play this movie in my head. And I just keep thinking it over and over. And eventually I have like a blurry movie playing in my head that I can sort of see like 70% completed. And when I get to that point, that's when I'm like, okay, now I'm going to start like going into Maya. So like I have to get it playing in my head to a point where I can see like specific choreography and camera moves happening. And it's only then that I like actually go into Maya. And then when I actually get into Maya, like I'll start off with, a lot of people do this, just like a block or a cylinder that represents the character, just to block out broad character movements and to figure out, more importantly, how the camera works. And yeah, from there it's actually replacing that block with the character and just going to town on it.
And do you approach at that point, or do you approaching it kind of like in a layered fashion, or are you kind of pose to pose, or what was your kind of actual approach for in terms of that?
It depends. Like, uh, I think, and I think a lot of people are like this now, or a lot of people gravitate towards this once they've been working for a while. But I sort of do like a little bit of both, like straight ahead and pose to pose. I think that's like a sweet spot that you can hit. Like, they both have like very powerful aspects to them. Like the straight ahead, you get like really organic stuff. Pose to pose, you get like really strong poses and silhouettes. So when you know which parts of what to combine, like I think you ended up with like the best version of your animation. So for example, for like Miles swinging across the city, if he's like doing, swinging around a building or anything, I'll just, take a block or a cube and just straight ahead, just animate that basic movement. And then once that's down, I'll take those curves and then like copy it onto Miles's COG. So immediately I already have some like straight ahead going on. But like when it comes to the posing of the rest of his body, that might still be like stepped and like pose to pose. But I need that like straight ahead like movement of the COG. I'm getting into very specific stuff here, so I apologize if.
No, I think most of our viewers, I assume, are animators, and so this stuff I think is some of the media's gold to them, honestly, and inspiring. Okay. At least they just hear people's workflow. But one thing that's interesting that I didn't hear, and I know everybody's approach is different, but you didn't kind of really mention any kind of like 2D exploration in terms of like, do you do like any thumbnailing or like, I mean, obviously you have boards if you're working on a film to go from, yeah. But in terms of like that or any like actual video reference, obviously this stuff is so dynamic that you probably can't go out and shoot most of it. But does any of that fold into your process, or are you really able to just kind of see a lot of it right out of your head?
Yes, I did skip over some of that. I apologize. I do thumbnail stuff. I don't thumbnail everything out, but if there's like a certain pose or like a certain part of the choreography that I can't quite wrap my head around, then I have to like draw it out just so I can see what it looks like. So I will do a little bit of thumbnailing. Also shooting reference. I will shoot reference for things that I can actually shoot reference for. Obviously I can't, jump off a building and swing around. But, for more like grounded stuff, like if character's on the ground, like swinging a sword, then yeah, of course I'll shoot reference for that. Yeah, and there's like clever ways to, even though I can't do some of the things that like a spider person can do, there's clever ways to like use reference of yourself and like turn that into something more like fantastic or crazy looking. There's a specific shot in SpiderVerse that I'm thinking of where Miles he just gets his powers and he ends up on the side of the building outside, and he's like walking horizontal.
Where the birds get him? And
yes,
it's like, yeah.
Yes. It's the one where he's like on the side of the building and the birds fly by, and obviously I can't do that, but there's a way to make yourself look like that you're doing that, like when you're shooting reference. So if you just, sit down and think about how things should look and like try to act that out in your reference, there's a way to like turn, just boring old me, like running around and like making it look like it's actually like happening on a side of a building. Like, yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that's good stuff, and that's insightful to kind of hear that. Yeah, the thinking through the problems and ways to utilize what you can to kind of help you visualize it or get there. So to that point, I mean, obviously you have a penchant for very dynamic, actiony type things. Are there types of shots that scare you? Like, are you less comfortable with like acting type shots or like deep emotional moments, or is that stuff just kind of not interesting to you, or like where does that fall on kind of your can do meter?
No, I think like acting stuff, like I do enjoy acting shots as well. And like, I do get a lot of satisfaction from doing like emotional acting shots. But to me, and I don't, I don't mean to sound conceited when I say this, but I feel like I've already sort of reached a certain level with acting where I'm just like, okay, like this is what it is. I know I can do this. Like, man, I'm not trying to like, bash acting shots or anything like that. They're very special in their own right. But to me, just like doing, the more physical, like action-based animation is just like way more exciting to me, and also presents more of a challenge for me that I'm like excited to go through.
That makes perfect sense, and I think I explain this to people that kind of leaning into your strengths and kind of recognizing and understanding what those are. Obviously, being castable, 'cause sometimes they just need quota, and that's the types of shots that are ready from layout or whatever. But I explain to people that it's fine to lean into what it is that excites you most or that you're most interested in, because even looking at somebody's reel, you can kind of tell, okay, this guy, he can do acting, but he really likes action, and that kind of you really strengthen those muscles and get great at that, and that a team, a well-balanced team, at least on a feature, needs all of those people. And it's up to the soups and stuff to know whose kind of strengths are what and cast accordingly and whatnot. But no, that's good to hear.
Your passion shows, like when you're working on stuff that you really enjoy doing or that you're excited about, like that shows through in your work and in your reels. And like, I think that's more important in some ways, to be able to like have people recognize that passion in your work than to just be, have a checkbox and be like, okay, I've got this in my reel, I've got this in my reel, I've got this. Just like, if you focus on stuff that you really, really enjoy doing and you do it well, like that really shows, and like people will like gravitate towards that. So I think that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly helps, to be at the right place at the right time in terms of a film that has a lot of that. Obviously, if there's a film that doesn't have a lot of that action, then that's a little more of a gamble. But no. So I guess to that point, are there at this point in your career, are there types of shots that scare you, or that you or would not be sure how to approach or be less comfortable kind of doing? Or are you kind of feeling pretty good at this point?
I think it would just need to be crazier action stuff, I guess. Like the stuff that scares me in terms of like the action shots, like the thing is like it may be like really daunting, but it's equally like exciting for me. And that's why I jump into it. Because like, if I look at something coming out of layout and it's like, I don't know, like a 500 frame shot with like cameras going nuts and like 10 characters, I'm just like, Jesus Christ, that's insane. But also at the same time, I'm just like, that's also really cool. And that's also very exciting. And like, I know that I'd be able to pull it off if I just dove into it. So
yeah, fear and excitement are kind of they're like fraternal twins. They're very similar emotions. You just have to just start, like you say, just keep get going, and you'll figure it out. Awesome. So you've mentioned it a little bit, I guess, before when we talked about leadership. But what do you have other, I guess, aspirations beyond animating? It seems like your passion is actually being on the box doing shots, but do you have kind of moving into supervising or directing or anything like that? Do you have other aspirations beyond animation, kind of as in terms of path progression?
At a certain point, like I think I wanted to like possibly go into directing, and maybe I'll do that on like a much smaller scale. But as time passes by, I'm not sure I want to go into like directing anything bigger than like a short or something like that. just because I guess this sort of relates to the previous question. Like that's really daunting to me. Like that's really scary to me. Have to like manage like an entire project like that and an entire or different teams of people. So at this point, I we'll see where it goes, but I'm pretty comfortable just like animating. And the other thing is like, I guess this is outside of, working at a studio, but like, I think I'd like to get into teaching because I've done some teaching in the past. And like, that's actually been some of the most rewarding work that I've done. So I don't know if I'm like an old dude too tired to animate at some point. I think I'd just, like to teach classes and stuff because it's been great. So.
That's good to hear, and I think it would be super exciting if you made a short. I think a lot of people would be excited to be involved if you directed a short. So one thing I often like to ask people is if you could go back, right? If you could talk to your go in a time machine back to yourself at SVA. What's something that kind of took you a long time to learn in your career that you wish you had kind of known sooner? It can be about actual like the any practical thing about actually doing animation, or even kind of a broader, more kind of like thing about career, how to approach shots, or behave yourself in the studio, or whatever it is like that. Are there things that you wish you kind of had known earlier that you wish you could kind of go back and tell your younger self?
That's a great question. I think I would just, I'm okay now in terms of like confidence in my animation, but for a very long time, I was very, I just felt like my work wasn't up to snuff when it actually was pretty decent, like when I look back on it now. But for the longest time, like I always thought that I wasn't good enough, that I always needed to get better. And, of course, getting better is like just a lifelong pursuit that doesn't stop. But I always felt like I was less than I was, like in reality. And so I think I would, if I had to go back in time, I would kind of just be like, hey, your stuff's actually not that bad. Stop being so hard on yourself. Like there is a benefit to like, being hard on yourself to a level because you're going to push yourself to get better, but there is a point where it starts to become a detriment. And I think that's what I would like to avoid in the past. Thankfully, I'm not in that space anymore, but yeah, that was definitely a thing for me like years ago.
I love that. And so we're kind of coming towards the end of our time, but one thing I also like to ask and just kind of hear people's thoughts on is what are your current, I guess, views or like thoughts on the industry? Are there things that excite you, or the things that you hope to see the industry move towards more of, or any kind of thoughts or musings as it relates to the current state of the industry, what you'd like to see, etc.?
Another great question. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm just excited to see more animation. Like just because like you look back only like, 2 decades ago and look at like animated movies, and the quality of the animation is just like, of course they're great movies, but like the quality of the animation is not quite there yet. And just the leap that we've made from then to now is like so huge. So I just get really excited about what the quality of animation will be from now till another 20 years into the future. Yeah. In terms of, there is some things that like kind of scare me. Like I'm a little scared of like the whole like AI stuff. I don't want to be black and white and say that like, we should just completely get rid of it. I think there are benefits to it. The answer always lies somewhere like in the middle, in like the gray area. It's not always black and white. I wouldn't say I'm excited about AI, but I'm just interested in seeing where that leads to, because I think there could be some like benefits to that. Like we all like, we all use like tools, like animation tools. If we have like a tool that will like do like secondary like ponytail animation for us for free, we're like, oh, that's great. Like, I'll take that. That's exciting. So, I don't think we should completely shrug off like the possibilities of like AI animation. But at the same time, it's a little bit crazy how fast things are going. So.
Yeah, and there's a normal, all throughout history, there's always a knee jerk reaction to the new technology, being scared and it's going to take all the jobs and whatever this and that. That doesn't tend to usually, full on be the case, and we just fold it in as a tool, whether that's motion capture or whatever it is. It's like all these things that kind of came and usually get people in an uproar. And there's adaptation that happens, of course. There's certainly fewer 2D films made now that the 3D is kind of taking hold and all these types of things. But I think there's I'm optimistic, but cautiously optimistic. I think there's ways to fold it in, because there are certain parts, certainly parts of the animation workflow that could be made simpler or made easier or made more enjoyable by better technology. And so there's room for growth that's not about displacement and not about putting people out of work or whatever, of course. It's like a little bit excited to see what happens, because there's it's a lot easier to do things now than it was before. And so there's room for growth, and we'll just see how all that unfolds. But great. So it's been an absolute pleasure, man, talking with you, and so grateful for you stopping by. Are there any kind of closing thoughts or parting kind of inspiration or wisdom you'd want to leave to the viewers out there to just kind of motivate people as we wrap our time up together?
Let's see. Just quickly. Oh, one thing I always say to people is, if you want to get better at something, so most people these days have Instagram, right? A really easy way to get better at animating something in particular, like if you wanted to get better at like physical animation or like acting, just start following accounts that show that stuff. So for example, like I used to like be a big pro wrestling fan, and I think that has helped me just to understand how like physics works. And even now, like I follow like tons of like, pro wrestling accounts on Instagram. And because of that, I'm always seeing videos of stuff, and like that stuff is just, I'm absorbing it. So it's as simple as like, just keep looking at things that you want to get better at. So like a great way to do that is to just start following Instagram accounts of, whatever you want to get better at. So that's my little tidbit, I guess.
That's a good, useful. I love practical tips, like something someone actually take and then go do right after they watch this. So no, that makes sense, and that it sounds like a good thing to try. So again, David, thank you so much. We really appreciate you stopping by. It was great, inspirational, motivational words from you. And we know the sky's the limit for you. I'm really excited for the things you're working on now and all the stuff you're going to work on in the future. And be sure to keep in touch, because we're excited to see how the rest of your career continues to unfold. Keep making great stuff and pushing all the rest of us to bring our best work to the screen. And we thank you for that. So thank you all for tuning in and watching, and we'll see you here next time on CG Riff. Bye.
Thank you.